don't know why I took this job. For a little bit of background, my name is Kingston. This takes place about 5 years ago, when I was 19. I was struggling with financial problems, and my family members were either dying, distant, or had gone no contact. I only have my brother now, but he isn't part of this story. I was sitting in my room, looking for jobs as usual, since I was in desperate need of one. The hum of the computer fan filled the dimly lit room as I scrolled through job listings, desperation clawing at my chest with each passing minute. The soft blue glow of the monitor cast eerie shadows across the cluttered space, illuminating the discarded resumes and unpaid bills that littered my desk. Unemployment had become a suffocating weight, crushing my dreams and draining my savings. The walls of my small apartment seemed to close in around me, a constant reminder of my failure to secure stable employment. I ran a hand through my disheveled hair, the greasy strands a testament to my neglected self-care. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second a mocking reminder of the time slipping away. I could feel the pressure building behind my eyes, a headache threatening to bloom as I squinted at the endless job listings scrolling past. But then, like a beacon of hope in the darkness, I stumbled upon an ad that seemed almost too good to be true. Immediate hire, $39 per hour, no experience necessary, the listing proclaimed in bold letters. My heart skipped a beat as I read the words, hope flickering to life within me like a flame in the darkness. It was the lifeline I had been searching for, a chance to escape the suffocating grip of financial ruin and reclaim control over my life. I leaned closer to the screen, my breath fogging the glass as I read and reread the listing. The job description was vague, mentioning only night shift security at a local hospital. But at that moment, I didn't care about the details. All I could see were the dollar signs and the promise of financial stability. With trembling hands, I clicked on the listing and filled out the application, my fingers flying across the keyboard as I poured my hopes and dreams into the digital form. The questions were standard fare: name, contact information, employment history. But with each click of the mouse, the weight of my desperation grew heavier, a silent plea echoing in every keystroke. As I typed, I couldn't help but glance around my cramped apartment. The peeling wallpaper, the sagging mattress in the corner, the empty refrigerator humming its mournful tune. All of it served as a stark reminder of how far I had fallen. I thought of my family, scattered to the winds or buried 6 feet under, and felt a pang of loneliness so acute it made my chest ache. I hit submit with a sense of trepidation, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me like a leaden blanket. What if it was all a hoax? What if I had just wasted precious minutes of my dwindling time chasing after a dream that would never materialize? The silence in the room seemed to grow louder, broken only by the erratic tapping of my foot against the worn carpet. But as the minutes stretched into hours and the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across my barren walls, an email appeared in my inbox, illuminating the darkness with its promise of possibility. "Congratulations," it read, the words dancing across the screen like a beacon of hope. "You have been selected for an interview. Please report to the following address tomorrow evening for orientation." Excitement surged through me like electricity, sparking a fire within my soul that had long lay dormant. I leapt from my chair, a cry of joy escaping my lips as I paced the small confines of my apartment. For the first time in months, a genuine smile spread across my face, the muscles almost aching from disuse. Tomorrow evening couldn't come soon enough. I spent the rest of the night in a frenzy of preparation, ironing my only decent shirt, polishing my scuffed shoes, rehearsing potential interview questions in the streaked mirror above my sink. As I finally collapsed onto my lumpy mattress, exhaustion and anticipation warred within me. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, my luck was finally about to change. As I drifted off to sleep, visions of a brighter future danced behind my eyelids. A fully stocked fridge, bills paid on time, maybe even a chance to reconnect with my estranged brother. As the sun dipped below the horizon and darkness descended upon the city, I allowed myself to dream of a future filled with possibility. I just didn't realize the job I had applied for would lead me down a path far darker and more sinister than I could have ever imagined. The next evening arrived with an air of foreboding that I stubbornly chose to ignore. As I made my way to the address provided in the email, the streets seemed unnaturally quiet. The usual bustle of city life had faded to a ghostly whisper, and the streetlights cast sickly yellow pools on the cracked sidewalk. The hospital loomed before me, a hulking silhouette against the darkening sky. Its windows were dark, save for a single light flickering in a ground floor room. As I approached the main entrance, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. The doors creaked open at my touch, the sound echoing ominously through the empty lobby. The smell of antiseptic and decay assaulted my nostrils, making me gag slightly. I called out a tentative hello, my voice sounding small and insignificant in the vast, shadowy space. "In here," a voice responded, emanating from the lit room I had noticed earlier. I made my way towards it, my footsteps echoing loudly on the linoleum floor. As I entered the room, I found a man seated behind a desk, his face obscured by shadow. "You must be Kingston," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "I'm Alex. I'll be conducting your orientation." As my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I could make out more of Alex's features. He was older, perhaps in his 50s, with deep-set eyes that seemed to bore into me. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there was something off about the way he moved, too smooth, too practiced. "Have a seat," he gestured to a chair in front of the desk. As I sat down, the chair creaked ominously, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was sinking into quicksand. Alex began to explain the job, his words flowing over me in a monotonous stream. "Night security," he said. "Monitor the cameras. Ensure nothing unusual occurs." But with each passing moment, a sense of unease grew within me. There was something he wasn't saying, something hidden beneath the surface of his words. "Before we proceed," Alex said, interrupting my thoughts, "there are some rules you need to be aware of." He reached into a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. As Alex handed me the sheet of paper, my fingers shook slightly with anticipation and dread. I unfolded it, revealing a long list of rules written in stark black ink. My eyes scanned the page, each rule sending a chill down my spine. "Rule number 1, I read aloud, my voice trembling slightly. "Survive until 6 a.m. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their implication. "Rule number 2, monitor the cameras for any anomalies. "Rule number 3, no leaving the basement until the shift ends." I glanced up at Alex, my eyes pleading for some reassurance, but his expression remained stoic and unreadable. "Rule number 4, at 2:25 a.m., check under the bed for any entities. Rule number 5, if you hear scratching at the door, do not open it," I continued, my voice growing hoarse with each word. The rules seemed to stretch on endlessly, each one more ominous than the last. "Rule number 6, At 4:45 a.m., you may go to bed, but be sure to set an alarm for 5:55 a.m. to ensure you wake up in time. I read, relief flooding through me at the thought of a few precious moments of sleep before the night's end. Rule number 7. If you hear laughter echoing through the halls, do not investigate, I continued, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end as I imagined the sinister sound ringing in my ears. As I reached the end of reading rule number 7, a sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. Well, of course I won't investigate, I muttered under my breath, a nervous chuckle escaping my lips. Rule number 8. Do not let the clocks strike midnight. The consequences: time will warp and distort, causing your body to age rapidly before your very eyes, leaving you a withered husk of your former self. The rules kept getting more confusing. How was I supposed to do this? Rule number 9. If you see a figure standing in the shadows, do not make eye contact. Rule number 10. If you feel a sudden drop in temperature, hide immediately and stay quiet. Rule number 11. If you hear your name whispered in the darkness, do not respond. Rule number 12. If you encounter a mirror, do not look into it. Rule number 13. If you see a door that wasn't there before, do not open it. I continued. Rule number 14. If you hear footsteps echoing through the halls, do not investigate. Rule number 15. If you feel a sudden sense of dread, trust your instincts and seek safety. Rule number 16. If you encounter a staircase leading downward, do not descend. Rule number 17. If you see a shadow move out of the corner of your eye, do not turn to look. Rule number 18. If you hear music playing from an unknown source, cover your ears and run. Rule number 19. If you encounter a locked window, do not attempt to escape. Rule number 20. If you hear a voice beckoning you to follow, do not heed its call. Rule number 21. If you feel a sudden sense of being watched, do not turn around. Rule number 22. If you encounter a door marked exit, do not believe it. I read, my heart sinking as the realization dawned that there was no escape from this nightmarish labyrinth. Rule number 23. If you see a clock ticking backwards, close your eyes and count to 10. Rule number 24. If you hear the sound of children laughing, do not be fooled. They are not children. As I reached the second to last rule, my hands grasped on the paper. Rule number 25. If you see yourself reflected in a mirror, do not trust what you see, for in this place, nothing is as it seems. Then, the last rule. I don't even know anymore. As I took a deep breath to steady my nerves, a new sense of dread washed over me. My eyes scanned the list of rules once more, searching for any additional guidance in the face of the of Alex. Rule number 26. The rules will change every night. Stay vigilant and adapt to survive. My heart skipped a beat as I read the ominous words, a chill creeping down my spine. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Not only was I trapped in this nightmarish scenario, but the very rules meant to guide me were in constant flux. I looked up at Alex, hoping to see some sign that this was all an elaborate joke. But his face remained impassive, his eyes cold and unblinking. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken horrors. "Do you have any questions?" Alex asked, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My mind was reeling, trying to process the impossible situation I found myself in. How could I possibly follow these rules? How could I survive in a place where even the guidelines for survival were constantly shifting? I don't understand. I finally managed to stammer out. What is this place? What are these entities you're talking about? Alex's lips curled into a humorless smile. You'll find out soon enough, he said. Just remember, follow the rules, and you might make it through the night. With that, he stood up abruptly, signaling that our orientation was over. Your shift starts now, he said, gesturing towards a door I hadn't noticed before. The basement is through there. Good luck. As Alex left the basement, his footsteps echoing faintly in the distance, I was left alone in the dimly lit room. The weight of the rules pressed down on me like a leaden cloak, their ominous warnings echoing in my mind. I took a tentative step towards the monitors, my heart pounding in my chest. The screens flickered to life, showing various parts of the hospital: empty corridors, abandoned patient rooms, a deserted cafeteria. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The basement itself was a labyrinth of shadows and whispers. The walls seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and I could have sworn I saw faces forming in the patterns of the peeling paint. The air was thick and heavy, tasting of dust and decay. Every breath felt like a struggle, as if the very atmosphere was trying to suffocate me. I settled into the worn office chair in front of the monitors, the leather cracking beneath my weight. The list of rules lay on the desk before me, a constant reminder of the precarious situation I found myself in. I couldn't help but wonder about the previous night guards. Had they all survived? Or had they fallen victim to the horrors that lurked within these walls? As the night wore on, the tension in the air became palpable, thick with the promise of unseen horrors lurking in the darkness. I glanced nervously at the monitors, my heart pounding in my chest as I searched for any signs of movement. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, each second feeling like an eternity. I found myself constantly referring to the list of rules, my eyes darting between the paper and the monitors. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. One mistake, one moment of inattention could be fatal. Suddenly, the lights overhead began to flicker, casting erratic shadows that danced across the walls of the basement. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as I watched the flickering lights, a sense of unease creeping over me like a suffocating fog. Then, without warning, the monitors flickered to life, each screen displaying a different scene of horror and despair. I gasped in horror as I saw images of twisted faces leering out from the darkness, their eyes burning with an otherworldly light. On one screen, I saw a figure dragging itself down a corridor, its limbs bent at impossible angles. Another showed a room where the furniture seemed to rearrange itself when I blinked. A third displayed a pulsating mass of flesh that seemed to be growing larger by the second. I tried to look away, to tear my eyes from the horrifying images that filled the screens before me, but I found myself unable to move, transfixed by the sheer terror of what I was witnessing. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the impossible sights before me. Was this real? Or had I finally snapped under the pressure of my desperate situation? As the images continued to flicker and distort, a sense of overwhelming dread washed over me, threatening to consume me whole. I knew I had to break free from the mesmerizing hold of the monitors to find a way to escape the nightmarish visions that surrounded me. With a desperate effort, I tore my gaze away from the screens, squeezing my eyes shut against the onslaught of horror. I reached blindly for the flashlight, its reassuring weight a lifeline in the darkness, as I struggled to regain control of my rapidly unraveling mind. My fingers closed around the cool metal of the flashlight, and I clutched it to my chest like a talisman. Slowly, I forced my eyes open, half expecting to see the horrors from the monitors materializing in the room around me. But the basement remained as it was, dark, oppressive, but devoid of the nightmarish entities I had witnessed on the screens. I turned the flashlight on, its beam cutting through the darkness like a knife. The shadows seemed to recoil from the light, retreating to the corners of the room. I swept the beam across the space, my heart racing as I searched for any sign of the horrors I had seen. As I scanned through the list of rules once more, a creeping sense of dread washed over me. Each directive seemed more ominous than the last, warning of dire consequences for the slightest misstep. But with a job offer this lucrative, I couldn't afford to back out now. The thought of returning to my life of poverty and desperation was almost as terrifying as the horrors that surrounded me. I forced myself to focus, to push aside the paralyzing fear and concentrate on the task at hand. I had to survive until 6 a.m. I had to follow the rules. I had to adapt. As the night wore on, the silence of the abandoned hospital weighed heavily on my shoulders. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of the lights sent shivers down my spine. I kept a vigilant eye on the monitors, scanning for any signs of the entity's presence. The hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. I found myself jumping at every shadow, every unexplained noise. The rules became my mantra, a lifeline in the sea of terror that threatened to drown me. Don't look in mirrors. Don't respond to whispers. Don't open unfamiliar doors. At 2:25 a.m., a chill swept through the room, causing my breath to hitch in my throat. I looked at the monitor, my blood turning to ice as I saw a dark figure materialize under the bed in one of the rooms. It moved with unnatural grace, its eyes gleaming with malice as it reached out with elongated fingers. Terrified, I froze, unsure of what to do. I knew I had to follow the rules, but every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. With trembling hands, I reached for the intercom, my voice barely above a whisper as I called out for help. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence of the empty hospital. As the entity drew closer, its presence suffocating, I realized with horror that I had broken one of the rules. But which one? My mind raced, trying to recall every detail of the lengthy list. Had I looked directly at it? Had I made a sound I shouldn't have? The entity on the screen seemed to sense my panic, its movements becoming more frenzied, more purposeful. I could almost feel its hunger, its desire to break free from the confines of the monitor and materialize in the room with me. With my heart pounding in my chest, I frantically searched the rule sheet for any guidance on how to handle this situation. But as I scanned the list, a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. There was no mention of what to do if an entity appeared under the bed. Desperation clawed at my mind as I racked my brain for a solution. Should I try to confront the entity? Or would that only anger it further? I glanced around the room, searching for anything that could help me escape this nightmare. The basement suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in around me. The air grew thick and heavy, making it difficult to breathe. I could hear my own heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. But before I could formulate a plan, the entity's eyes locked onto mine, sending a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. It seemed to sense my hesitation, feeding off my terror like a predator toying with its prey. Its form began to shift and warp, growing larger, more menacing with each passing second. With a surge of adrenaline, I made a split-second decision and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my ears as I sprinted down the hallway. The rules be damned, I had to get out of there. The sound of my footsteps echoed off the walls, creating a cacophony that seemed to awaken the very building around me. As I ran, the hospital came alive with nightmarish activity. Doors slammed open and shut of their own accord. Lights flickered and burst, showering me with sparks. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting like the lungs of some monstrous beast. But no matter how fast I ran, the entity was always one step behind me, its malevolent presence pressing down on me like a suffocating weight. I could feel its cold breath on the back of my neck, its claws just inches from grasping me. The corridors of the hospital twisted and warped around me, stretching impossibly long one moment and shrinking claustrophobically the next. Reality itself seemed to be unraveling, the laws of physics bending to the will of the malevolent forces that inhabited this place. As I reached the stairwell, I stumbled and fell, the impact knocking the wind out of me. The cold, hard floor pressed against my cheek as I gasped for breath, my lungs burning with exertion. For a moment, I lay there, paralyzed by fear and exhaustion, certain that this was the end. But the sound of something inhuman scrabbling against the walls jolted me back to my senses. Gasping for breath, I struggled to my feet and continued my desperate flight, knowing that my only chance of survival lay in reaching the safety of the outside world. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my legs trembling with fatigue and terror. The stairwell seemed to go on forever, each flight looking identical to the last. Had I gone up or down? Was I getting closer to the exit or just descending deeper into this hellish labyrinth? Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me, I saw it. A door marked exit, glowing faintly in the darkness. Hope surged through me, giving me a final burst of energy. I reached for the handle, my fingers just brushing against it. But just as I reached the exit, a bone-chilling laugh echoed through the halls, freezing me in my tracks. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, reverberating through my very bones. I turned to see the entity looming behind me, its twisted form silhouetted against the dim light of the moon streaming through a nearby window. In that moment, bathed in the pale moonlight, I saw the entity clearly for the first time. Its form was a nightmarish amalgamation of shadow and flesh, constantly shifting and reforming. Multiple eyes blinked at me from impossible angles, and its mouth, or rather mouths, were filled with row upon row of needle-sharp teeth. With a final burst of adrenaline, I flung open the door and stumbled out into the night, the cold air hitting me like a slap in the face. The sudden shift from the stifling atmosphere of the hospital to the crisp night air was jarring, making me dizzy and disoriented. I found myself in a small courtyard, overgrown with weeds and choked with shadows. The moon hung low and bloated in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the scene. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. But even as I fled into the darkness, I knew that the entity would always be there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had only just begun to uncover the true horrors of this abandoned hospital. My breath came in ragged gasps as I stumbled through the deserted streets, the echoes of the entity's laughter ringing in my ears like a relentless taunt. The city that had once been so familiar now seemed alien and hostile. Shadows danced at the edges of my vision, and every flicker of movement sent a jolt of panic coursing through my veins. I dared not look back, fearing that its twisted form would materialize behind me at any moment. The rules that had seemed so crucial just hours ago now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the primal instinct to survive. The streets were unnaturally empty, devoid of the usual late-night traffic and pedestrians. It was as if the entire city had been abandoned, leaving me alone to face the horrors that pursued me. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of my labored breathing and the pounding of my heart. Every shadow seemed to conceal a lurking threat, every flicker of movement sending a jolt of panic coursing through my veins. I knew I had to find safety, to escape the clutches of the entity that had haunted my every step since I set foot in that accursed hospital. But where could I go? My apartment suddenly seemed like a fragile sanctuary, its thin walls and flimsy locks no match for the supernatural terror that hunted me. And who could I turn to? Who would believe my tale of nightmarish entities and reality-bending horrors? As I rounded a corner, my heart sank at the sight of another dark figure looming in the distance. It stood motionless, its silhouette blending seamlessly with the shadows, as if it were waiting for me to approach. The streetlight above it flickered and died, plunging the area into darkness. Fear surged through me like a tidal wave, threatening to overwhelm my senses and drag me down into the abyss of despair. My legs felt like lead, each step a monumental effort. The fatigue of my night of terror was catching up to me, my body screaming for rest, even as my mind shrieked in panic. But I refused to surrender to the darkness, to let the entity claim me as its prey. I thought of my brother, the only family I had left. I thought of the life I had hoped to build, the dreams that had driven me to take this cursed job in the first place. I couldn't let it end here, in this nightmare of a night. Summoning every ounce of courage I possessed, I forced myself to continue forward, each step a battle against the paralyzing grip of terror. The figure remained still, its presence a looming specter that filled me with a sense of impending doom. As I drew closer, the figure began to take shape, its features twisted and contorted into a grotesque mockery of humanity. Its eyes gleamed with malice, sending a shiver of revulsion down my spine. Was this another entity from the hospital? Or had the horrors I'd witnessed somehow followed me into the city, infecting the world around me? With a surge of adrenaline, I veered off course and ducked into a nearby alleyway, hoping to lose my pursuer in the labyrinth of narrow streets. The alley was dark and rank, the smell of rotting garbage and stagnant water assaulting my nostrils. I stumbled over discarded trash and broken bottles, each noise sounding impossibly loud in the quiet night. But no matter how hard I tried to shake it, the entity remained hot on my heels, its presence a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked in the darkness. I could hear it moving behind me, a sound like wet flesh sliding over concrete. The walls of the alley seemed to close in, the sky above narrowing to a thin strip of starless black. Desperation clawed at my mind as I raced through the maze of alleys, each twist and turn bringing me closer to the edge of sanity. The buildings loomed overhead, their windows dark and empty, like the eyes of dead things watching my frantic flight. I burst out onto a wider street, momentarily blinded by the sudden light of a street lamp. As my eyes adjusted, I saw a 24-hour diner across the road, its neon sign a beacon of normality in this night of terror. Without thinking, I sprinted towards it, praying that the presence of other people might offer some protection against the horrors that pursued me. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully as I burst into the diner, a sound so incongruously normal that it almost made me laugh. The few late-night patrons turned to look at me, their eyes widening at my disheveled appearance and wild-eyed panic. "Are you okay, son?" the elderly waitress behind the counter asked, concern etched on her face. I opened my mouth to respond, to pour out my tale of horror and beg for help. But as I did, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror behind the counter. My face was pale and drawn, dark circles under my eyes, testament to the night of terror I'd endured. But it was my eyes that truly shocked me. They seemed older somehow, haunted by the things I'd seen. And then, just for a moment, I thought I saw something else in the mirror. A flicker of movement behind me, a hint of a twisted, inhuman shape. I whirled around, my heart in my throat, but there was nothing there. Just the curious and concerned faces of the diner's patrons. I turned back to the waitress, forcing a weak smile. I'm fine," I lied, my voice hoarse and trembling. "Just had a rough night. Could I get a coffee, please?" As I sank into a booth, cradling the steaming mug of coffee in my shaking hands, I knew that my ordeal was far from over. I may have escaped the hospital, but the entity, or entities, would always be waiting, lurking in the darkness, ready to claim their next victim. The rules echoed in my mind, a grim reminder of the supernatural world that had been revealed to me. And until I found a way to break free from its grasp, I would never know true peace again. Every shadow would hold potential terror, every reflection a possible gateway to horror. As the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, I stared out the diner window, wondering what nightmares the coming night would bring. For now, I was safe in the warm light of the diner. But the night would come again, and with it, the rules would change. And I would have to be ready. The entity, whatever it was, had opened my eyes to a world of darkness and terror that existed alongside our own. A world governed by twisted rules and populated by nightmarish beings. And now that I had seen it, I could never unsee it. The normal world, with its comforting routines and mundane concerns, felt like a thin veneer, barely concealing the horrors that lurked beneath. As I sipped my coffee, my mind raced with questions. What were these entities? Where did they come from? And most importantly, how could I protect myself against them? The list of rules, as terrifying as it was, suddenly seemed like a lifeline, a guide to surviving in this new, nightmarish reality. I knew I couldn't go back to my old life. The job at the hospital, as horrifying as it had been, had opened a door that couldn't be closed. And deep down, beneath the terror and exhaustion, I felt a flicker of something else. Curiosity, a desperate need to understand the forces I had encountered. As the diner began to fill with the morning crowd, their chatter a soothing reminder of normal life, I made a decision. I would go back. Not to the hospital, never there again, but to the world it had revealed to me. I would learn the rules, all of them, and find a way to survive in this new reality. The entity would be waiting, I knew, but next time, I would be prepared. And maybe, just maybe, I would find a way to fight back against the darkness that had consumed my world. As I left the diner, stepping out into the harsh light of day, I felt changed. The naive, desperate young man who had walked into that hospital for a job interview was gone. In his place stood someone else, someone harder, warier, but also more determined. The city around me looked the same, but I knew the truth now. Behind every shadow, beyond every reflection, lurked a world of nightmares, and I was now a part of it. I began the long walk home, my mind already turning to the challenges ahead. The rules would change every night, the dangers shift and evolve, but I would adapt. I would survive. And somewhere in the shadows, I knew the entity watched and waited, ready for our next encounter.